Hi, class. I'm with you today to discuss some terminology. So, I realized when I was grading your quiz, the quiz that talked about Acts 1 and 2 primarily from Othello, I realized that some people were getting the same question wrong a lot of the time. So I thought I need to look and see what's going on with that. And what I discovered is that a lot of people didn't see the cornerstone concepts in week 3 of the class. So here I am in week 3 of the class, Othello, Acts 1 and 2, pages 930 to 967, etc. And I scroll down to cornerstone concepts, drama, some of which pertains to fiction and poetry. Click that open, and I get a long list. So try not to be daunted by the length of the list. The point is that we need a vocabulary with which to discuss the plays, the plots, the people, the characters, who interacts with who, what's a theme, etc., etc. So this cornerstone concept sheet, which has I think 28, 30 different uh, definitions on it, contains material that will be resurfacing in other discussions throughout the semester. So, poetry, for instance, if I scroll down to the bottom, poetry is all about figurative language, language that uses figures of speech, like metaphor, the comparison of two things that are very different from each other without the use of like or as, such as the sky is a blue eye. It's not saying the sky is like a blue eye, which would then be a simile, the second one, but it's talking about the sky being the blue eye. And those two things are very different, although they have similarities. Other examples of figurative language that we find throughout the works of literature that we're reading are image. I'm using my five senses to understand something that's going on in the play, such as when um, the when when the handkerchief in Othello is dropped and Amelia picks it up, and that moment of picking it up is a tactile image. I can feel the handkerchief in my fingers as I'm reading it, and then as it is planted by Iago in Cassio's room, and then he finds it, and then Bianca is asked to uh, work on the embroidery of it, to learn the embroidery because Cassio likes the embroidery. All of that is intricate, sort of textile, um, tactile feelings, tactile images. So I'm using my sense of touch to understand those images. Other tactile senses I use, of course, are my eyes for visual, my taste, tongue for gustatory, my nose for olfactory. And what am I leaving out? I'm leaving out big ones: tactile, touch, taste, smell, sight. All of those come into play. And then a symbol. Okay, we have symbols that represent things. So a concrete object can represent an abstract idea, such as a flag can represent the idea of freedom. The US flag for freedom for some people, for other people maybe not. It would depend. So symbols can have different meanings for different people, right? So let's think about when we're looking at this long list, let's think about the things in it that pertain to drama specifically and not others at the moment. So if I look at the plot in in relation to the play, I can say that there's an exposition of the plot, number 3. Exposition, first phase or part of the plot, sets up the scene. Iago is uh, getting Rodrigo, he's enticing Rodrigo into helping him get Brabantio's attention by making a ruckus in the street. And then there's chaos. So the two of them have a little secret at the beginning. Rodrigo, if you give me money, I will help you get Desdemona, right? He eventually talks about that. And I'll scheme with you about you obtaining Desdemona as if she's, something like a handkerchief that can be possessed. And you, in turn, will help me whenever I need it to ignite all of these schemes that I'm going to do. So there's exposition in that. There's a setup, and Brabantio is called out, and Rodrigo is saying, do you know where your daughter is? Your daughter has been sleeping with a black man, and uh, he is becoming, Brabantio is becoming very incensed, and he's saying suddenly, give me light, which is a symbol. We could say that that's a symbol of his needing to know the truth, light. So a lot of this play takes place in the dark. We move from dark to light in the first and second and third scenes of Act 1. And then by the end of the play, we're living in total darkness again, right? So there's the idea of light and dark contrast running throughout, and we could talk about them in relation to symbol. So in this exposition, though, Brabantio, he calls for light, and then he finds that his daughter is not in the house, and he says something like, this is what I've been fearing in my own dreams, that she's vanished, that she's eloped. And he goes to the Duke to consult what he should do, and the Duke and Othello are there, and Othello is asked if this is true, and Othello says, yes, it is true. I'm in love with your daughter, and we're married. So they'd already eloped, and it's their wedding day that very day. And all of this is exposition leading to rising action, which is, we're finding out that Iago is jealous or envious of Cassio's position underneath the general Othello, and we're finding out that Iago is going to try to seek revenge in any way that he can. Deception. He's going to use deceptive means. And we're discovering that Iago's very good about directing people to do certain things, just like a director in a film is. And the action is rising because there's a number of incidents that happen, such as Cassio, Iago gets Cassio drunk, or encourages Cassio to get drunk. So he takes advantage of Cassio's flaw, right? And Cassio gets drunk, and then Rodrigo is directed by Iago to enter into an altercation with Cassio, and that altercation between Rodrigo and Cassio leads to another altercation between the governor of Cyprus. And all of this is taking place because Iago has set it up in this rising action, and we know more and more that something terrible is going to happen soon, and we're preparing ourselves for it. We don't know, however, that the general himself is what? How would you say? He's a bit, he's lacking in self-confidence, isn't he? Do you see Othello as lacking in self-confidence, even though he's this massively important general? Remember, he is chosen by the Duke and the people of Venice to go and fight the Turks who are trying to take Cyprus, and Othello can't be replaced. He's the most important general. So there's all of this going on in the exposition, and then we reach a climax, which happens in Act 5. So ratcheting up the rising action, and then there's a climax, and that, according to this diagram, or according to these definitions, there's After the climax or the turning point, there's a falling action. And then there's a conclusion. So we need to follow what happens in the conclusion. The question that most people, or probably half the class, got wrong has to do with the aside and soliloquy. So number 27 and 28. So many people thought that the aside was a soliloquy. A soliloquy is a longer speech. It is delivered to the audience, but it's the actor talking directly to the audience and delivering his or her intimate thoughts and gathering the audience in and asking the audience to take very strong care in listening to what the actor has to say at that moment, because it's very important. He divulges, the actor or actress divulges important information, sometimes about the past in a soliloquy, sometimes about what he thinks is going to happen in the future, and as I said, his internal life, his real thoughts. An aside, on the other hand, is a short speech, so it's not even really a speech, it's usually a line or two that a character delivers in an undertone directly to the audience. So it's an aside, right? It's something that is almost whispered and that the audience overhears and that the actors on stage can't hear it, right? And so the audience is privy to this information. So we have numerous asides in Othello, and these asides are given to us in the stage direction of the play. And let's remind ourselves, what is stage direction? Number 19. Stage direction's often in brackets and or italics. Stage direction indicates important aspects of characters, such as entrances, exits, clothing, tone of voice, facial expressions, gestures, movements, such as, and there's an example, aside, when Iago speaks to the audience in Act 2, Scene 1, line 165. So there's a good example. You can consult that line to look at both what the stage direction is and what an aside is. Tragedy, a type of play in which literary and dramatic representations of serious actions turn out disastrously for the protagonist. So let's talk about characters for a second in relation to tragedy. Because it says protagonist, a protagonist is often depicted as the main character, right? And he or she is a big character, a dynamic character, so the dynamic characters change throughout the play, versus a static character does not change. A round character, which a protagonist usually is complex, multifaceted, and they act in ways that readers might not expect, but the readers or the audience accepts that it's possible for them to act this way. So we have different kinds of characters, and the protagonist is generally in the center of the action. Everything's revolving around this one person, Othello, in the play Othello. But I want to make the case that no character is really the only character. Every character in literature is in relation to other characters. So when you're choosing a character to depict in your paper, you're looking at that character, but also that character's relations to others. It's impossible to think about Othello without Desdemona coming into view. And it's impossible to think about Desdemona coming into view without thinking about Iago, and then Rodrigo, and then Cassio, right? And Emilia, Iago's wife. All of them are in intricate, almost locked. They're trapped with each other. And how do they get out of the trap? And therefore, are they not like us? Even though they are from a different century, even though they wear different clothes and speak different English than we do, even though they live under an entirely different government than we do at an entirely different time. There's no electricity, there's no running water, there's no toilets. Most people live in thatched huts with a fire in the middle that's always on in the daytime, and all the smoke filling the house and the smoke rising up through an aperture at the top of the ceiling. Even though all that's different, we are all trapped, aren't we? There's something that we can't have, someone we can't have, some job we want, but we aren't sure we're going to get it. We're not making enough money. I want to move. I can't live where I live in the city, etc., etc. There's always some kind of feeling of being entrapped. And then we figure out a solution. And then the trap, it opens. The door opens, and we walk through it. And in this play, at the end, who is left? I'll leave you with that thought, and please look over the rest of these definitions, as some of them will pertain to the short fiction and poetry. Thanks for listening.